One, two, welcome to Sustainability Summit. Yep. Can I mute? one of the most incredible minds of our time, Nobel Peace Prize winner Wangari Maathai, would say there are opportunities even in the most difficult times. And certainly, if we want to make it, there are certain things that we need to stop doing. With that, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tabang Mashiko, and I am your pilot for the Sustainability Summit 2022. We welcome you, we welcome all of our sponsors, all of our exhibitors, and we want to thank you for taking the time to join us and having rigorous conversations such as these. You know, it's very important for us to interrogate the meaning of sustainable development, or what sustainability really means. And we know that sustainability ensures a balance between economic growth, environmental care, and social well-being, particularly for our citizens. So in this summit, we'll be engaging on different conversations, particularly around agricultural development, the ocean economy, energy as well, and the discourse at large. And how are we in terms of development when it comes to infrastructure and innovation? And what can we do to ensure that future generations are sustained? And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be crossing over to our keynote address opening the Sustainability Summit for this year and speaking about Sustainable Cities Africa. And we'll be introducing our speaker shortly.
The FP&M CETA's mandate is to provide services to the clothing, footwear, forestry, furniture, general goods, leather packaging, printing, print media, publishing, pulp and paper, textiles and wood product sectors. Furthermore, the FP&M CETA must implement the objectives of the National Skills Development Strategy and ensure that people obtain the critical or scarce skills needed to build the capacity of the sector to become economically sustainable and globally competitive. The intention of the National Skills Development Strategy is to increase access to training and skills development opportunities, to transform inequality.
Okay, sit back on me. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again. Please don't forget to hashtag SUSWeek 2022. That is SUSWeek 2022 on all social media platforms. We're looking forward to your questions. We're looking forward to your analysis. Let us know what you think. Engage with us on the chat room. Engage with all the exhibitors. Without also wasting further time, I wish to thank our leading sponsors, the United Nations Global Compact, also IDC, which is the Industrial Development Corporation, as well as CSIR. Ladies and gentlemen, as I did mention that we will now have our keynote address kickstarting the Sustainability Summit for 2022. It is a great honor to introduce Mr. Sunil Janes, who is a Director for Global Governance Affairs and CSR Africa, which also engages on global sustainability. And he is from SAP. Over to you, Mr. Janes. Thank you.
Tabang, for that warm welcome, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone, wherever you are in this digital era that we find ourselves in. It's a pleasure and an honor to join us once again at this fantastic event, which leads
they came up with this real-time software which was able to report on processes within organizations, taking into account the generic processes that you have linked to HR, payroll, accounts payable, etc. And that happened in 1972, and we can't believe it, we're 50 years old already. It's a multinational corporation operating in several countries with a turnover of some 27.84 billion euros in the last financial year, which was in 2021. And for those who don't know what SAP stands for, it's Systems, Applications, and Products in Data Processing. But of course, that's a mouthful, and it's been abbreviated to SAP. Now, the topic for today, what an interesting topic. It's been a topic for a long while. I remember a while back, somewhere around 2009, I received a scholarship to attend what was then called the One Planet Leaders, which was held WWF. And of course, I always had a passion for sustainability and was very excited to have received the scholarship, which took me to Geneva and first, and then segued out to Zurich, only to find myself undergoing this entire process and immersion into the topic of sustainability in a very interesting place, which is actually previously a church, which was then set up to be a sustainable organization. And back then, I just listened at that time to the presentations, and most of the presentations that were made at that time were from the likes of your FMCG manufacturers, so to speak, your Coca-Colas of this world, who also happens to be a customer of SAP, SAP Miller, your beer manufacturers, organizations that were typically utilizing a number of resources. And in 2009, the WWF was saying that we need 1.5 planets to sustain the way that we're consuming on this, this Mother Earth of ours that has sustained us for generations. And to think now that although this sustainability topic was limited in those days to these manufacturing industries, guess what? The topic has become the primary focus in every industry, in every continent of this planet that we find ourselves in. More so at every societal level that you find yourself, sustainability is the topic of the day. Now, let's then drop down a level and talk about SAP and how we're approaching this topic of sustainability. It's always been a major topic for us from early days. And SAP views the topic of sustainability from two perspectives, or sort of two levers. The first one is to be an exemplar. You've got to walk the talk. You've got to lead by example. And the second, because SAP is involved in the so-called production or development of software, our carbon footprint is nowhere near the likes of the carbon footprints of some of our customers that we have in oil and gas, or in the avionics industry, the airline industry, or the motor manufacturing industry. So therein lay one of the biggest opportunities of SAP, which was to become an enabler to our customers and our partners. And in so doing, I will talk a little bit about that. So just imagine this SAP, two pillars. One is to be an exemplar, and the second one is to be an enabler. Now, as an exemplar, an interesting fact, which is we don't talk about enough, I believe, within SAP, but of course outside it's becoming even more well-known topic, is that SAP has been the leading organizations in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for the past 15 years, which means that practices that were focused on ensuring that the organization remained a sustainable one have been in place. Much of what we do is included in our integrated sustainability report, which talks from one end of the spectrum of how we hire more and create more diversity in the organization in terms of our internal sustainability, how we go about our corporate social responsibility practices, and what type of programs and projects we are putting in place within the organization to reduce our overall carbon footprint. Now, you'll hear from other speakers, and I've seen a lineup of some of the most fascinating speakers. I'm interested to listen to some of them later on to the future. But then let me talk about a few other aspects. Now, SAP produces software, and we produce software for different industries, from motor manufacturing to your oil and gas, and then in the public sector as well. And I noted the next item on the agenda is smart cities. Now, we have an increasing interest in this area because a number of the world-class cities in the world, on this planet operate on SAP software. And much of that, you'll hear much more about that in the next session. But I thought I should touch on that and sort of highlight the fact that increasingly cities around the world are where the rubber sort of hits the road. That's where majority of people are living their lives. From a provincial level, in terms of administration, etc., policies, practices are more at the higher arching level and the national level. Now, coming back to this whole idea of being an exemplar first and foremost, SAP has been for a while now, working across the board, internally within the organization, working in different areas to ensure that as many of our employees are brought up to speed on the topic of sustainability and how this impacts us within the organization per se. And we have another topic which is driven quite strategically, which is the sustainability champions within SAP. And that's largely people who may not even be part of the sustainability organization per se, but who are doing great things in their society because it is the topic of the day. Now, in terms of just taking it further on the work that we're doing as an enabler, SAP has also developed a software stack for sustainability, which a large number of our customers are increasingly taking on to ensure that they are able to plan for their carbon footprinting, so to speak, to be able to monitor that, to then utilize the monitoring and then analyze what they have within their companies, and then seek to improve on the way that they conduct their businesses so that practices in all formats remain sustainable, and focusing on some processes towards what we call net neutrality. And we are finding more and more the bigger customers that are involved in manufacturing, involved in sort of production of oil and gas, taking up this software, which is making them what we will call intelligent organizations. And the idea about sustainability is not just to have some gobbledygook speak about it, but to break that down and to bring it closer to home. And talking about bringing it closer to home, some of our work began in sort of 2008, 2009, when we initially embarked on a program through what we had then called SAP Research in Ghana with the cashew nut and shea butter farmers. And just trying to find processes that we could put in place to enable these women, largely women farmers, to get a better yield, firstly, and more importantly, to get a better price in the marketplace. And that resulted in us eventually developing our SAP Rural Sourcing Management System. And today in Ghana, we're also using that system to assist what you would call in South Africa, and I know we have a global audience today, but in South Africa, people refer to them as the waste pickers. More particularly, they are individual plastic collectors that are out there. And using this rural sourcing management system, what we've been able to do in Ghana, together with the project with the World Economic Forum, was to put in place what we call our SAP Plastics solution. And essentially, that enables individual plastic collectors to be put onto a system where the amount of plastic that they collect is recorded, the different types of materials outside of plastics that they may be accumulating is recorded. Government is linked up into that, so they have an idea if there are any precious metals that may be also being collected. and then using market analysis to give these individual plastic manufacturers, or sorry, plastic collectors, the capacity to be paid fairly. What is the going rate of plastic at that moment in time? And linking them up to buyers who may be more centralized and who are more bona fide, as opposed to some of the cutthroat trading that we've seen happen in some of the streets of South Africa. So I thought I should mention that, and therein lies sort of three things. One is the ability to utilize our primary sort of output, which is our software, to enable the support of what we talk today about, which is the circular economy, ensuring that everything that is produced is included in this sort of cycle of non-waste. More importantly, impacting those that are at the lowest levels of society, being able to give them a fair chance, providing them also with dignity in that process. And then if you extend that further, we know that there are millions of tons of plastics that are produced, and at least 50% of that plastic globally ends up being single-use plastic. So these waste pickers or waste collectors are playing a valuable role in society. And SAP, together with the World Economic Forum, has piloted this in Ghana, and we're seeing the benefits of it. Ultimately reducing the plastics burden in Ghana, but then also assisting government, because government, even in South Africa, has proven to be, so now I won't say they are clueless, and maybe the wrong terminology to use, but they haven't come up with any innovative ideas of including these waste pickers into the sort of formal economy, which is so ripe outside the likes of in Johannesburg. You have Pick It Up, in Durban, when you have Durban Solid Waste. So the integration of those individuals into the sort of formal economy hasn't happened to that extent in South Africa. And therein lies a big opportunity. The circular economy, bringing in people who may be outside of it, giving them dignity and ensuring that, they also have the capacity to develop themselves through technology. Now, just taking it one step further, SAP is also part of what we call the Global Plastics Action Partnership. And that is a partnership that has been conglomerated with the World Economic Forum. And the idea is our global CEO went up on the global stage, and within SAP, one of the things as an exemplar is that we don't engage in single plastics use. And this is another area where if you look at corporates and the amount of spending that happens and some of the waste that happens within various corporate, this we believe is a very strong aspect, and it should be like a global standard, not only in corporates, but moving it closer to government, moving it closer to quasi-government organization, social enterprises, and the whole layer. Now, I also want to chat today and highlight a couple of other points. The entire carbon footprinting and the issue of global warming is critical. Even though we are a software company and our emissions are lower than other industries, SAP has taken a very, very direct approach in terms of addressing climate change. And this comes through our deforestation project, which we have. One of them, which we've implemented, is in Madagascar. And the area is called Mararivo, where we found that mangroves were almost totally decimated. We've reforested there. We've built up the economy so that more people could be part of that economy. The local tribes have been utilized to do the reforestation. And in a short space of time, we went from an absolutely barren area to almost 2 million trees that have been planted. But within that context of addressing climate change and forestation, we're also finding that jobs are created. And this is the most difficult thing today. COVID has decimated so many economies. Sustainability within the overarching challenges of what COVID has provided has become more difficult to implement. And I think as we move forward, we'll have to find much more innovative practices, because it's easier to take the less sustainable route than the sustainable one, because there is a cost associated. Now, just talking about the rest of today and where we are going to, I noticed that one of the sponsors is the UN Global Compact, and I smiled when I saw that, because SAP was one of the original signatories to the UN Global Compact so many years ago, almost, I think it's more than a decade ago. I remember that happened in New York. And having these different organizations, the sponsors that are here today, being part of this program, is a further commitment that sustainability is more than just a talk show. The practices that will come out here will determine the future of this country. I'm talking to you using a mobile device today. I would normally be talking to you from a proper, nice, high-speed Wi-Fi internet that I'd have at home. But the challenges produced by the energy provider, the electrical energy provider, ESCOM, has brought the starkness of sustainable life and what that means. Previously, we would have just put that on the back burner and said, it's just a short time, a short period of time. But increasingly, we're seeing now the energy deficit in the country and the impact that it's had on overall economy in this country. And if we delve down just one step further, I've noted also that there are some parts of the program which talk to a just energy transition. And I know hydrogen would be one of those topics that would come up. But an interesting thing happened recently. The local MD of SAP, she had engaged with one of our biggest customers. And the gentleman is based out of Nigeria. And he said to her, you know what's interesting? This issue of sustainability, let's be clear about it. There's a Western perception of sustainability and an African perception. And there's still a bitterness on the carbon load that has been put into the atmosphere and the planet, and who is actually responsible for that. And there is a larger responsibility on Western industrialized countries to do a lot more. I know there's a fund being made available to support South Africa's transition from coal to other more renewable resources. But we also seen that geopolitical issues such as the Russia-Ukraine war that has happened has changed the way even a mega industrial giant like Germany has begun to engage. Because when Russia cut off the gas supplies, Germany had to look back and see to determine whether they would go back to coal-fired energy sources. So as much as we have good intent, as much as it makes good sense for the planet to be sustainable and sustainable practices to evolve, the geopolitics of our current times and the future will also determine the extent to which we will reduce the overall global warming to less than 1.5 degrees over the next sort of 10 to 15 years. Because ultimately, if you do have these very, very polar sort of thinking around sustainability, around near thinking, which I would say, which is around countries themselves and about space and geography and power, there is that balancing act that needs to take place. And the UN also needs to play a much greater role. It's not good enough just to have 17 SDG goals, but the countries need to be held accountable and responsible for that. Governments need to be held responsible. And how are they going to be held responsible? That framework still has to be determined. Reporting is not enough. We need tangible actions to take place to hold countries. I'm not saying name and shame them, but to hold countries accountable so that when presidents go to the United Nations General Assembly, it's not just about shaking hands and enjoying caviar and sitting in Manhattan and enjoying champagne at the highest levels of those buildings. But it should be more so about what's happening back home to enable the sustainable journey and the sustainable future of these countries and the next generations. Now, I'll leave you with those thoughts for today. And I hope that I have been able to capture your imagination in some way about what we have done as SAP and what we continue to do to support sustainability. But more importantly, how this particular program that has been put together has been well thought out to take into account some of the current challenges, the future challenges, and bringing key stakeholders to the fore. But in your discussions and deliberations, I will also encourage you to be brutally honest, because we are just wasting each other's time if we're going to come here and have pleasantries for the sake of pleasantries. We need to call things out. We need to be able to put actionable programs in place to realize the sustainable future. I thank you and wish you well for the rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jeunesse. Truly an insightful conversation. And you're right. We can't achieve anything without accountability, transparency, and being brutally honest about what we stand to lose as a country and a global community if we don't take tangible actions towards sustainability. We're tired of the caviars and the champagnes, we're tired of, expenditure being around 1 million with our leaders going to all these trips, but nothing, truly comes out of it. I truly appreciate a lot of the sentiments that you shared, reminded us about, the 4 pillars of sustainability really being achieving human value and efficacy, social impact, making sure that with social impact, economic viabilities are accompanied, as well as environmental adaptability. So thank you very much for that. And also key tenets that you dropped there. It was very interesting to note that we need 1.5 planets to sustain us. I think that's quite scary, and I think this is why a lot of scientists are exploring life on other planets. There is a question that did come through from one of our participants, and they are asking this: software and hardware companies like SAP have massive data centers which use lots of energy. How much PV has SAP installed? That's from David.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that question. So on data centers that we've developed in other countries, we don't have any as yet, I should say that. But they largely focus on the utilization of sustainable energy. So the use of solar in some cases, wind energy is also utilized in some of our more northern countries that we find our data centers in, because all of that is factored into the mix when we look at our internal exemplar status. Even the utilization of these data centers, it forms an extension, it's a tentacle of what we're actually doing. And we also encourage, with the likes of partners like Accenture and other partners that we work with, to work along similar lines and to support global sort of initiatives and pacts that are signed to ensure that the data centers one, but more importantly, ultimately buildings themselves that they utilize. Of course, now in the COVID, we're not making the best use of buildings, but ensuring that they're smart buildings and efficient buildings. We're seeing a lot of that happening, sort of in Europe per se, and we want to develop those practices and implement them most strategically. I should just mention one more little point, Thabang.
Sure.
In South Africa, in our local office, one of the key projects as an enabler that we're implementing, we're using SAP software because we say you must eat your own dog food. We're using SAP software to harmonize, reduce the use of all kinds of products, for be it plastic, be it consumption of utilities like electricity, water, and gas. So we've linked up meters to all of that, and we have certain targets that we need to hit. So similarly, that software is utilized in other buildings, and by extension, if we're working with data centers, we also sign certain service level agreements around carbon footprint data centers.
Absolutely. Very critical point that you mentioned, which I think a lot of organizations and even, citizens that are prioritizing the issue of sustainability to say be an exemplar and being an enabler. And I think that that was something that was very key, because it also speaks to how we can even, challenge policies and practices around sustainable development. Thank you very much, Mr. Jenes. Truly an informative presentation, and we look forward to engaging further around practicalizing some of the tenets that you've mentioned there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Well then, ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Jenes, Director at SAP. Truly insightful commentary there, particularly around how do we find economic value when it comes to waste, and how do we develop intelligent cities. Thank you very much for engaging on our chat. Please be reminded to visit our expo or our exhibition online. The more you engage, you stand a lot of prizes to win, but hold that dial. It's about to get really heated when it comes to conversations around sustainable cities. We'll be having a panel discussion that will be facilitated by Paul Curie. Stay tuned right after this.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us in our session entitled Collaboration for Sustainable Cities in Africa. My name is Paul Curry. I'm the Associate Director of the Urban Systems Center at ICLEI Africa, and we're delighted to yet again be hosting this session as part of Sustainability Week. I believe this is our fourth year in this collaboration, which we really value as a moment when multiple stakeholders are coming together to really talk about how we achieve sustainability, particularly in these difficult times. So the reason why we are interested in the idea of cities is because cities are concentrators. They are the concentrators of population. Over 50% of people live in large cities. About 85% of people in the world live in and around cities, in suburban areas, peri-urban areas, small towns, villages, spaces which are yet to become big cities. And when we're talking about sustainable cities, we have to think about how we equip these intermediate spaces to take on large challenges, complex challenges. Cities are concentrators of energy and material consumption. About 60 to 80% of materials and energy are consumed through urban processes. They are responsible for 75% of greenhouse gas emissions. And therefore, they are the spaces where, if we intervene effectively, we can drive widespread change to achieve sustainability. Cities also bring together a fabulous array of different people, creative expression, and are spaces where innovation and accidental experiments can emerge that can then lead to new ideas and solutions for sustainable development. So today we've decided to focus a bit more closely on SDG 17. We typically tend to focus these conversations on localizing the SDGs, but our interest in unpacking what collaboration means is because in the development sector, we've gotten used to using these words, co-production, collaboration, and partnership, often as the last framing of a policy or the last framing of a document that we need to do this together. And we want to unpack a bit about what that looks like, to do it in more meaningful ways. So I'm delighted to have brought together our colleagues to reflect on this in their work. So to introduce our panel, we have Kobie Brunt, who's the Regional Director of ICLEI Africa and the Deputy Secretary General of ICLEI Global. We have Telly Chauk, who's part of Sustainability, Climate Change and Environmental Governance in the Kocha Development Corporation. We have Sholape Hammond, who's a Special Advisor to the Lagos State Office of SDGs and Investments. And we have Michael Oloko, who's part of the Kisumu Local Interaction Platform, each of whom have great experience around SDG localization, as well as driving partnerships for meaningful impact. So we look forward to an engaging and informal conversation to share some of our reflections. And I invite our panelists and speakers to reflect on what each other is sharing. So to start us off and set the scene, I'd like to invite Kobie to reflect on why localizing the SDGs is so important, and a bit about what we're doing at ICLEI Africa to drive this agenda forward. So welcome, Kobe.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul, and also to our special fellow panelists here. It's very nice to be with you. Some of you I haven't had the pleasure to be with for a long time, so it's especially nice to connect on this topic here during Sustainability Week. And thank you very much indeed to the organizers of Sustainability Week for making this panel available and possible for us. I wish to reflect briefly on our current situation in contributing to achieving the SDGs and the importance of partnerships. Agenda 2030 has set out a groundbreaking global framework of 17 goals with 169 targets and 230 indicators. It's rightly very ambitious and aims to promote radical changes to how our society interacts and operates. The pandemic, associated government responses at all levels, and current global inflation has had impacts on all three dimensions of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental. And the fourth one, the emerging one, that's often called the fourth leg, the cultural dimension as well. COVID-19 caused a major disruption in people's lives and livelihoods, and the current conflict in Europe has sent prices for everyday goods and services soaring, and there's no end in sight to that price soaring that we are experiencing. While progress to achieve the SDGs have been slowed down even before the pandemic struck, an additional 119 to 124 million people were pushed back into poverty in 2020, and the recovery thus has been slow. The pandemic showed our weaknesses and fragility, but it also demonstrated our strength, the ability to adapt and innovate in unexpected and unprecedented ways by unexpected actors as well. This has been displayed by strong local leadership with countless examples from all over the world. Post-COVID recovery presents us with an opportunity to urgently transform and act fast towards a more equitable and sustainable pathway for the localization of SDGs, which is so imperative in this decade of action. However, when contemplating how we move forward, we must acknowledge that there is still a disconnect between national commitments and local realities in many ways. This means that national policy is often missing vital inputs and context, and that implementation of these national policies at local level is often ineffective, incomplete, or inappropriate, even with the best of intentions on all sides. Subnational governments should not be seen as mere implementers of the agenda, but rather as partners in articulating how this agenda manifests in their jurisdictions, within their mandates, and how best to take action to achieve these goals. Subnational governments are policy makers, catalysts, and change makers, and they change and are best placed to link the global goals with local communities because they are best placed to bring around change at the local level. In the context of growing reflections on the ways to build back better and to get back on track to achieving the SDGs in a post-pandemic world, numerous calls have been made in support of interventions to build local institutional and fiscal state capacity, or to upscale existing community initiatives in order to achieve transformative urban recovery. To best achieve this, I argue in favor of a lateral approach for post-pandemic development. Such an approach recognizes the significance of peer-to-peer exchange and learning between cities as an important accelerator of progress on localization of global policy agendas. Opportunities for horizontal learning are especially important for African cities, for which access to urban expertise or resources is dependent on either global organizations, city networks and alliances, or on national governments. In fact, I would argue it's dependent on all these and many more structures that need to be in place to support local action. The ways in which future urban growth and development is managed will greatly determine the extent to which global development goals are met, making cities and local governments key parts of the solution to achieving sustainable development. There is a need to promote and support exchanges beyond North-South alliances towards South-South alliances by bringing together cities between different African countries and within the same country, so as to share learnings between cities, large and small, developed and less developed, that share similar backgrounds and challenges, because the size of the city often doesn't change the issue at stake and the impact felt by that community, however large or small that community may be. The impact is the same. If a child goes to bed hungry, that child experiences that in a similar way in wherever they are located. In this regard, city networks such as ICLEI provide important platforms to share and build on the experiences and learnings around SDG localization of existing members of city networks. Expanding such opportunities among a wide range of smaller cities represents an enormous contribution to accelerating the benefits of mutual exchange and learning. And also in the urban-rural context, there's so much that happens at provincial level that can accelerate SDG implementation. We need an integrated approach and multi-level governance when it comes to localizing the SDGs. This will ensure that we truly leave no one and no place behind. To this end, ICLEI Africa has been working with our local government members across a number of fronts. For instance, on improving access to finance for high leverage projects that can improve climate adaptation, food access, and nutrition security, and regenerating biodiversity and natural systems. Aligning national, regional, and local policies is another area of our work, and strategies alongside those policies to avoid duplication and contribute to effective sustainability programming at local and subnational level. And another way is by supporting local governments to lead cross-sector interaction and collaborative processes. Given today's session is focusing on SDG 17, my favorite one, on partnerships and working together and not reinventing the wheel, and the nature of partnerships, I thought I would share 6 recommendations emerging from the Scaling Up movements for climate change adaptation project that we're currently running. Many development actors use the term of co-production or partnership or collaboration quite loosely, while often failing to effectively draw on the ideas, energy, resources, and actions of multiple stakeholders and mixed groups of people working on the same issue or problem at stake. These recommendations offer guidance to local governments and civil society organizations to effectively develop meaningful partnerships for collective action. And I want to highlight 6 here. Number 1, create collaborative governance frameworks that support innovative ways to address climate change and produce just, inclusive, and effective policies. Secondly, coordinate among civil society efforts for stronger advocacy to and with local and subnational governments by instilling effective processes and frameworks and building capacities. Thirdly, establish neutral engagement platforms, neutral, to bring diverse and unheard voices to the table and navigate power dynamics in order to share multiple forms of knowledge and galvanize just and effective climate action. Fourthly, involve NGOs and other urban stakeholders meaningfully by providing them opportunities to present what they are doing and by co-developing city plans with them. In fact, they are the people who live their lives and spend their times and spend their revenue and raise their children in these cities and towns. They need to be part of planning the city they want to live in. This ensures ownership and shared responsibility for implementing these plans. Fifthly, map government mandates and resources at a local level to understand the authorizing environment. In other words, governance structures, gaps, challenges, and opportunities. And lastly, explain local government policy and decision-making processes to ensure civil society understands this authorizing environment and can meaningfully contribute to government processes. To get the SDGs back on track, a mean task, I must tell you, and we don't have lots of years left, we need to improve collaborative processes from national to local level and across different stakeholder groups. Governments, cities, industries, and communities have to use the recovery to adopt to low carbon, resilient, and inclusive development pathways that will reduce carbon emissions, conserve natural resources, create better jobs, advance gender equity, and tackle growing inequities. I wish to end off today as an opening remark by saying that while the SDGs are global in nature, their achievement will depend on our ability to make them a reality in our cities and our regions, our collective ability. Together, we can be ambitious. We need to stop paying lip service to the ideas of partnership and collaboration by actively investing in meaningful collaborative processes. We can collaborate on tangible actions to support cities and regions in protecting vulnerable people, fight against climate change, protect and enhance jobs, and ensure a just, resilient, and equitable recovery for all. It is our duty, it is our job. We as ICLEI are ready. We in ICLEI Africa take this especially seriously in this day and age when we see that poverty is all around us, needs are all around us, the environment is degrading, and climate change is already very actively influencing our lives. So the time to act is now, and the only way to act is together, ambitiously and boldly. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kobie. I think you've set the scene very much for why collaboration is vital, and sharing some frameworks to draw out some of the keywords from your input. I think the idea of needing strong local leadership, the idea of partnering between national and local subnational governments, and then partnership horizontally between different cities, but also with different actors on the ground. And that point, the last sort of recommendations around kind of demystifying what governance processes are going on so that people can actively participate, I think is really valuable. So with that, I'd like to invite Shalape to share some reflections about what this looks like in Lagos State. What does your work entail? Obviously, as one of our up and coming huge mega cities, the challenges are even more present. So what does localizing the SDGs look like there, and how are you using partnerships to drive your agenda forward?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Paul. One word, what does it look like? Scrambling. So my name is Shalape, as he said, and I run the Lagos State Office of SDGs and Investment. And for those who don't know Lagos very well, Lagos is a low-lying aquatic city in Nigeria. It's a commercial center of Nigeria, financial, digital, cultural. It's really a hot pot of everything Nigeria. We like to think of ourselves as the heart of Africa. We've got more than 22 million citizens that reside on the smallest landmass in Nigeria, all in Lagos. So more than 12% of the population lives on 0.5% of the landmass. So we've got, and we're a low-lying city, so we've got all the challenges of a sprawling, densely populated, climate challenge, fast-growing, highly commercial, extremely energetic city. So that's where we operate. And Lagos has a huge economy. It's roughly 30–40% of the economy of Nigeria. We like to say if Lagos was a country, it would probably be the 5th biggest economy in Africa. So for us, we see it, it's a huge challenge to manage on the environmental side, on the economic side. And so you can understand why partnerships and collaboration for us are extremely important. And I like to think that our office is the personification of SDG 17 partnerships. Really what we see is partnerships has been the secret sauce of Lagos, the key to our success over the years, especially in the last 2 decades. One of the things Lagos has done incredibly well is collaborating with the private sector, development sector, and the civil society. And that really is one of the things that we have tried to amplify in our capacity. And so how does Lagos try to make this work? And I think so much has been said by Kobe, especially around how do you get the tiers of government to collaborate better? And how do you work with the rest of the economy? Nigeria operates a federated system. So we have a federal government, we have 36 states and a federal capital territory, and we have 774 local governments, of which 30 are in Lagos, and we have 50 other local council development authorities, we call them. So a total of what we would call 57 local governments within Lagos, all trying to manage this huge group of 22 million citizens. And so that is one challenge to face. She also talked about how do you get everyone else rallied around. And the framework that we tend to use is essentially fourfold. For us, very early on, the Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, when we started to plan to come into government, realizing we had a very short amount of time to try to achieve this daunting task of implementing the SDGs successfully in Lagos, we created a development plan called the Themes Agenda, which looks at traffic and transport management, health and environment, education and technology, making Lagos a 21st century economy, which is where we look at power, water, commerce, agriculture, food security, housing, all the things you need to have it as a great livable city, entertainment and tourism, and then security and governance. And when we created that, we created a framework for managing and measuring impact. And we saw that it looked very much like the SDG framework. And so we readily adopted the SDG framework. Indeed, that's why our office was renamed the SDG and Investment Office, so that we can use the lens of the SDGs to look for the investments that we want to help us to achieve what we intend to achieve as a state. And so first thing we did was to mainstream the SDGs, because it was a relatively easy platform. It's globally known, people understand. It has, again, very clear KPIs, measures, and indicators, the outcomes we want to see. And so it was relatively easy to map what we wanted to do to that, so that it would be instantly recognizable to anyone who was not from within our city or from the government, to understand what it is that we want to achieve. And we also then had a framework with which we could drive the performance that we wanted to see. So mainstreaming that, I mean, today I don't think anyone would speak from the Lagos State government, or even mostly from Lagos State, without referring to the SDGs. It's a very big part of how we think and how we approach problems, and how we look for solutions. And so that's something that we've managed to do quite well over the last 3 years or so we've been in government. The next is communication, and that's been a real area of challenge. It's very difficult to work together if we all don't know what we're doing. And for us, again, just to paint the context of why it's so important to get people to work together in Lagos, the Lagos State government's budget is roughly $3 billion. That's the biggest that it has been over time. No, $2 billion this year. The economy of Lagos is roughly $140 billion. This tells you that if the government put all its resources in trying to solve even one problem on the SDG list, it wouldn't work. But if we could channel what everyone else is doing to trying to arrive at the same outcomes, we have a far greater chance of success. We believe in Lagos that really, if we want to scale outcomes successfully, government has to take leadership, but really implementation is in the hands of the private sector and all our partners in civil society who actually live out day to day. So it's very important to communicate. And I think I love what Kobe also said around starting together. A lot of the challenge is globally, and I think it's a global problem. Maybe people are becoming more aware. People tend to do things top down. So the government plans and then expects people to go along. And they involve maybe a small group of people. We found in Lagos, Lagosians are also very, very smart. They're very, very innovative. They're very fast moving, and they really don't like taking orders from anyone. We find it tends to be a lot better when you plan with them. We try as much as possible. Of course, you can't get 22 million people in a room, but we've created platforms for collaborating. And one of the greatest platforms we have in Lagos is the Ehingbeti Summit. Ehingbeti is actually a location in Lagos. It's the Lagos Economic Summit, and we have one coming up 11th to 12th of October. So we invite everyone to join us. It's a hybrid conference and summit. You can join us from anywhere in the world. We had 31,000 people join us last year. It's a small pitch. But essentially it's a platform for collaborating, and a lot of the great ideas from the Lagos Transport Master Plan to some of the infrastructure developments to our Eco-Atlantic project, which is a landmark, globally innovative solution to what was erosion of one of the major commercial streets in Lagos that then became a new city of 1,000 hectares simply from the Ehingbeti Summit. Over time, over the last 20 years, this summit has held, now 22 years. We've had more than 210 resolutions that have been agreed to by the government, the development sector, and the private sector. And these have all, about 90%, we have a 95% implementation rate, which shows you that when you put all of us in a room and we agree to go together, we really do go far. So for us, that communication is key, and then we come together to collaborate, which is the other C. And then the last thing is measurement, and I can't talk about that enough. It's something that we've taken in and we have continued to do. We run a sustainability assessment for the state every other year to make sure that we are on track and to see how well we're doing with implementing the SDGs. And we're very excited that this year, for the first time, Lagos will be implementing our voluntary local review, working together again with all our partners in the development space and across the different tiers of government. And so for us, that's been the framework we've used: mainstream, communicate, measure, and collaborate. And so that's helped us to work across those tiers of government fairly well. I think one last thing to say before I close and before the questions start, just to talk about what I think everyone sort of brings to the table. So the public sector brings the reach, and we can do the policy direction, but the private sector brings the funding, they bring the capacity. The civil society tends to bring the outcomes, and they have the grassroots penetration, and then the development sector comes with the big picture, and they tend to help us with data. And then the individual is extremely important as well, because we know it's personal actions that are going to get us where we need to go. So as I like to say, Lagos, what I think really works for Lagos is that collaborative spirit. It's sort of an ecosystem that's a big puzzle, and the more pieces you put in the puzzle, the better and bigger a picture you're going to get. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sholape. I think what you've described is some very productive scrabbling, if that's your first entry point. And just on your framework, so mainstream, communicate, collaborate, and measure, I think is fabulous. And to mainstream an idea in 3 years, I think is a fabulous feat. So well done on that, and very much looking forward to participating in the summit to hear what Lagosian ideas can emerge. It'll be great. So from West Africa, let's turn our attention to South Africa again and invite Tele to share some ideas emerging from Coega about SDG localization and the role of partnering in your work.
Thank you, Paul. And let me just, I guess, repeat every speaker's notions so far about being excited to be on this platform. And excited to again be having a conversation that's about cities, because I do have a long history of working with cities, and I'm now leading sustainability at the Coega Development Corporation. I found that this conversation is very important for the corporation to be part of, but certainly to nurture relationships with the partners that are going to be at the Sustainability Week and at this event in particular. So I'm very excited. Paul, the Coega Development Corporation is a public entity. It's wholly owned by the provincial government of the Eastern Cape, and we are mandated by the Special Economic Zones Act to be an operator of a 9,003 hectare special economic zone in the Eastern Cape, in Port Elizabeth, formerly known as Port Elizabeth, and now Gqeberha. We are a development agency. We are anchored around providing support to the provincial government and contributing to the national objectives of sustainable social economic development. We provide, or we do this through investment of infrastructure development, the promotion and assistance to small to medium enterprises, as well as the mentorship and facilitation of skills transfers to SMEs, as well as to the broader community. So we see the CDC as having an intrinsic role in furthering the mandate of the South African government, certainly in the province, but also extending further afield and beyond our provincial boundaries. And we have a mandate that extends beyond the Eastern Cape, it reaches onto the African continent, 3-hectare SEZ in the Eastern Cape, as well as the Nelson Mandela Bay Logistics Park. And we also then have a provincial presence in KwaZulu-Natal, in the Eastern Cape, in the Western Cape, as well as in Gauteng. Domestically, we've got quite a wide reach, and we're also foraying into the continent to help with solution seeking and solution implementation on a number of what presents as sustainability challenges. So right here at home, we have on our SEZ, we've got 4 zones, and these provide a home for a number of industrial actors or players in the space, including logistics cluster, the automotive cluster, light metals and medium industry, heavy industry, the chemicals cluster, ferrous metals, mariculture and aquaculture as well. So we've got quite a wide range of economic activity that is being coordinated or facilitated through our presence in the Eastern Cape. The CDC, Paul, and I don't want to wax lyrical on our mandate, but I think it's important that we contextualize our role as a corporation within the framework of the province, as well as being located in the region and in the city of Nelson Mandela Bay. I think the sustainability and functioning of the city is contingent on the existence and functioning and sustainability of the CDC and operating a sustainable SEZ. But our existence is also contingent on a successful city, on a city administration and city governance that works. And so the symbiotic relationship between Guga and Nelson Mandela Bay municipality is quite important. But because we also have operations further afield than the province, we also then geographically find ourselves with a footprint in other municipal districts and in other provinces. So it's important that we contribute to the functionality and sustainability of those locations as well. So I guess the symbiosis that I speak to is a melding of the worlds between what we would perceive as developmental challenges, economic opportunities, industrialization, and finding a marriage of dual purpose with the sustainability agenda, the climate agenda, and so on. So whilst we've been able to leverage an investment commitment of about 50 billion, and we have operations in the Central African Republic, in Nigeria, in Senegal as well, and exploring a lot more opportunities on the continent, sustainability has become an important consideration for the CDC. So last year, the CDC took a decision to establish a sustainability unit, and we are developing a sustainability framework, which is anchored on growth and development of the province, as well as contributing to economic and social impact in the country, but also then extending our services to those agencies and departments that need to be able to strengthen their sustainability and their impacts from a social, environment and governance perspective. So our sustainability framework really tries to encapsulate the ethos of what this conversation is about, partnerships. And so we view SDG 17 as central not only to the sustainability of ourselves as a corporation and as a business and helping us achieve our triple bottom line, but to ensure that our value chain, which extend beyond ourselves, is also unlocking sustainability in terms of our tenants, those industry players from global footprints, that they are able to operate sustainably within our SEZ and contribute to the global agenda. Paul, what I've found quite, I guess, very, very impactful already in this conversation, and it's, it's still early in the conversation, but I found a lot of synthesis or points for synthesis in terms of what Kwabi outlined as, as her parting shots or as recommendations, as well as the conversation that's unfolded right now. And for us at the CDC, we believe that the co-creation opportunity in the solution space is immense. We all face pretty much similar challenges in terms of the risks posed by climate change, the risks that are posed by our economic and financial constraints. And so what best opportunity is there but to partner with cities, partner with other non-state actors, partner with civil society and the business community to co-create solutions and to generate those high impact initiatives that would help us meet not only the SDGs in their entirety or try to contribute. We only have 8 years left after all, but definitely to use the SDGs as a springboard for what comes next after the 2030 agenda. And to start committing to a post-2030 future that is more resilient and more sustainable. So the issue of co-creation is quite important. And given our role as the CDC in the provincial scheme of things, as well as an implementing agent for national and provincial governments and our footprint on the continent, the issue of alignment of planning becomes very important. And so you find that a lot of actors often will plan for their own development, considering their own context and their own immediate needs. And so we need to align planning instruments across the 3 spheres of government, specifically supporting cities to meet their own developmental mandate and build their capacities to provide those basic ingredients that are necessary for corporations like ourselves to function. But in aligning our planning, I think we need to mutually go through visioning exercises in terms of the future we want to see. And we believe at the CDC that whilst we are firm players in the solution space, we also face our own challenges from capital constraints and from the growing need and demand for our services. So the co-creation space and the partnership space with other actors around data sharing of knowledge and skills, and also collaborating to unlock these funding blockages that we see and to create a pipeline of projects that contribute to the sustainability agenda are very important. And so I find a lot of resonance in terms of what other speakers have mentioned, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of this conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Telly. I think that's really interesting at your point on a symbiotic relationship, and acknowledging codependence. We can only do our work if other people are able and equipped to do their work. And I have a follow-up I want to explore with you in a moment. But I think from West Africa to South Africa, let's go to East Africa and hear some experiences from Kisumu, from Michael. And so here the Kisumu local interaction platform very much acknowledges this need for interacting across stakeholders and across sectors. So I wonder, Michael, if you can share some of the methodology of what you do.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paul, and all the presenters that have been there before me. I would start by introducing myself. My name is Michael Oloko. I'm a researcher at Jaramogi Oginga Odinga University of Science and Technology, and also the coordinator scientific research at Kisumu Local Interaction Platform. Kisumu Local Interaction Platform, CLIP, is an organization linking researchers from the academic institutions with the community and the practitioners, policymakers, and other stakeholders to work together and address critical societal issues and also promote dissemination of research findings. Over the last 10 years, CLIP has been working on a number of thematic areas. Key among them are socio-ecological issues, socio-spatial, and socio-cultural. Within these thematic areas, there are key research projects that the researchers were dealing with. More relevant to this discussion, since 2015, CLIP has been working on 2 projects that relates to SDG. One is testing the relevance and feasibility of measuring
Sorry, Michael.
targets. And
Just to come in, we can't see your slides changing. Is it possible to reshare your screen or to make it bigger? I think if you just share your desktop and then activate the slideshow, that'll work.
And this can be identified within the SDGs, ranging from SDG 1 that talks about poverty and zero hunger, that is food security, issues that relates to climate, that is SDG number 11, and also SDG number 17. So most of these topics or research areas that we've been